Normandy, France. Easy Company of the elite 101st Airborne Division is dropped behind enemy lines hours before the main D-Day invasion of Europe. They must take out 4 German howitzers trained on the US soldiers trying to assault Utah Beach. The US paratroopers are outnumbered 5-1, but the safety of the Allied forces on the beach depends on the success of Easy Company's mission. Failure is not an option. (1,500 feet above the English Channel. Hundreds of Allied Douglas C-47s are heading for the Normandy coast. Among the aircraft is a specially trained fighting force of US paratroopers. Easy Company is part of the 101st Airborne, nicknamed the Screaming Eagles.
Paratroopers need to carry more kit into battle than the average infantry soldier because there's no resupply. They carry on average about 70 pounds worth of equipment. With the parachute, that goes up from 90 to 120 pounds above their own body weight.
Standard issue includes an M1 Garand rifle with 8-round clip, a cartridge belt with canteen, Mark II fragmentation grenades, a heavy-duty flashlight, a machete for up-close combat and clearing undergrowth, and the trusty .45 caliber Colt automatic pistol. In the next hour, these men will be dropped into enemy territory to undertake one of the most daring assaults of D-Day. As they approach the French coast, their C-47s come under heavy German anti-aircraft fire. But it's built to survive the heaviest punishment. Based on the DC-3, a pioneering US passenger plane, the Douglas C-47 is a Second World War icon. Powered by twin 1,200 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp engines, they allow the C-47 to climb to a combat altitude of 1,500 feet. With its spacious tubular cabin, the aircraft could carry up to 28 fully geared up paratroopers. Specially adapted for parachuting using its rear exit, more than 20,000 troops leapt into the skies above Normandy from these aircraft on D-Day. This workhorse of the sky is renowned for being able to withstand huge amounts of damage, yet still keep on flying. It's a quality the C-47s will need tonight as the men from Easy Company approach the French coast in the early hours of D-Day. "5 years into World War II, and Nazi Germany's once dominant forces are being pushed back on all fronts.
In June of 1944, the tide had turned in the war. The Allies have driven the Germans and Italians out of North Africa. They are fighting their way up the Italian peninsula. On the Eastern Front, the Soviets have pushed the Germans back out of Russia itself and are fighting their way through Poland. In general, the Germans are now losing the war and the Allies are winning it.
To gain supreme victory, the Allies have to open a Western front. Codenamed Operation Overlord. The plan is to launch the biggest invasion in history to gain a foothold on French soil from which the Allies can begin the liberation of Western Europe. The Normandy coast is the target, with 5 beaches designated as the key landing grounds. Their code names are Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Airborne troops will drop behind these beaches to support this amphibious assault.
The Allies plan to land almost 160,000 troops in Normandy in just 24 hours. But any Allied attack faces terrible odds because the Germans have been building up their defenses on the French coastline since 1942.
Hitler's Atlantic Wall stretches across the coast of Europe, from Norway down to Spain. This extensive system of defenses and fortifications includes colossal coastal guns, batteries, and artillery. The Germans have also flooded much of the land behind Utah Beach, so the Allied troops moving inland will be forced to advance along one of the narrow causeways in range of the German artillery. It will fall to Easy Company to take out these guns. They'll fly over the Atlantic Wall defenses on the north coast of France, directly into the jaws of heavy anti-aircraft fire. Parachute into their drop zone behind enemy lines. Advance to Brecourt Manor, 3 miles from Utah Beach. Neutralize any defenses hidden in a 3-foot-deep interconnecting trench system. And attack the 4 deadly 105mm howitzers, all while under fire from MG-42 machine gun posts located to the west of the big guns. But intelligence on the ground is sketchy at best. They will have to work most of it out as they go. The men of Easy Company are jumping into the unknown. This is their first operation in the war. All they do know is that if they fail, a key part of the D-Day invasion will be under threat, and the Allied invasion of Europe could stall, extending this deadly war. Leading one of the platoons of Easy Company is 26-year-old First Lieutenant Dick Winters. He enlisted in August 1941 and has been training for nearly 3 years in the lead up to this moment.
This was the first time I'd been under fire, and my adrenaline was pumping. The fire began to crack as it got closer to the aircraft. And it cracked louder and louder until it hit the tail of our plane.
The tail fin of Winters' C-47 may have been hit by German flak, but luckily, it survives the onslaught and keeps on flying. In tight formation to the right of Winters is a C-47 carrying Easy Company's headquarters section, including its commander. Winters can see his commander's plane taking fire.
Tracers went clean through the plane and exited the top of the aircraft. It appeared they were going to make it. But then it did a slow wing over to the right, hit a hedgerow, and exploded.
None of Easy Company's senior officers will survive the crash. He doesn't know it yet, but Winters will have to take command and lead these men on this deadly mission. Easy Company's mission into the heart of occupied Normandy is not off to a good start. The Nazis have been expecting an invasion for months, and they are letting the aircraft carrying the Screaming Eagles have it. As they near the drop zone, Easy Company prepares to make their jump. Second in command of a platoon and about to make his first ever combat jump is 22-year-old Second Lieutenant Buck Compton.
A heavy cable ran down the ceiling of the inside, front to back. Just before we were to jump, we'd clamp ourselves into that cable, which would pull our chutes from their bags once we jumped. There was no singing, no patriotic talk. Adrenaline surged, but I didn't feel nervous. This was what we'd signed up to do.
It was during the 1920s that people began to consider soldiers on the offensive would actually be dropped by parachute. By 1944, we've moved into a whole new phase where complete divisions of parachutists can be put down on and behind the enemy lines. A formation of battlefield power rather than merely a raiding force.
Easy Company's advanced parachute training took place at Fort Benning, Georgia. In order to finally qualify as a paratrooper, the men had to make 5 live jumps carrying all their gear. Most of the paratroopers carried their heavy equipment in a bag strapped to their leg.
So the system set up here is that I have a leg bag here attached to a strap on the harness. And what I would do is, as I'm coming into land, about 150 feet up, I'm gonna bring my leg up to release the straps, and then I'm gonna kick the bag down onto my boot. And when I'm ready, I'll kick the bag off, and now I'm free to come in without all of my kit and hopefully do a safe parachute landing.
Under the right conditions, this tried and tested method is the best way to drop into battle with a lot of gear. For Easy Company, things aren't going according to plan. Still under heavy fire, the inexperienced C-47 pilots react instinctively to avoid being shot out of the sky. They open up their throttles.
The pilots were supposed to slow to almost a stall so we could jump out. But our pilot didn't slow at all. I can only assume he was in a real hurry to get out of there.
Easy Company's men are given the signal to jump. But they're traveling way too fast.
As soon as I jumped and felt the opening shock, the straps holding the bag flew off over my boot. The cord attached to the bag began to feed out so fast I couldn't hold it. It was burning my hands, so I let go. The bag disappeared into the night. Strapped to my belt were a trench knife and a canteen. With my leg bag gone, those were the only supplies I had.
And right behind him is 21-year-old Sergeant Bill Ganier.
Making it through the jump alive was a feat. Your heart's pounding, the sky's chaos. The planes are dumping men from Cherbourg all the way to Paris. All in the wrong places. Thousands of troopers coming down from the sky. It was like a duck shoot for the Krauts.
In their attempt to avoid being shot down, the pilots have scattered Easy Company miles from their target. Many paratroopers don't make it. Some fall into land flooded by the Germans and drown. Others hit trees, buildings, and anti-glider poles.
Dropping parachutists is not an exact science. They get scattered widely over the countryside, and that's certainly true of the 101st Screaming Eagles. They're not in the places that they're intended to be. So to gather the men on the ground is itself very difficult.
Lieutenant Winters is one of the lucky ones. He's down in one piece, but he's lost his leg bag and all his equipment.
Despite this deplorable situation of landing in enemy territory without a rifle, I still wasn't scared. Don't ask me why. Fear paralyzes the mind, but I needed to be able to think clearly, especially when men's lives were at stake.
Every man in Easy Company should have landed with a full set of gear, enough to survive 2 days of intensive fighting. But many of the men, including Winters, have landed without even a weapon. Gathering what little gear he has, he moves through the dark, scavenging for weapons.
We came across some dead Jerrys, and I was still looking for a weapon when I found an M1 in a German wagon.
Winters needs to be careful. Abandoned weapons on the battlefield can often have a sting in their tail.
It's common for defending forces to lay booby traps, and the Germans did just that, so the paratroopers had to be extremely careful about what they picked up. Booby traps were improvised from whatever a soldier had to hand. It could be a mine, a shell, or a grenade, and these would go off when a hidden trigger was released. It wasn't just weapons. Any innocuous object could be used. Chairs, beds, picture frames, these could all be totally lethal. Soldiers also had to look out for tripwires, especially in doorways. With all this going on, the attacking force has to become cautious. It slows everything down, and that's why it's such an effective defensive tactic.
After landing safely, Sergeant Bill Ganier is also on the hunt for weapons.
I went looking for a gun. I found a Thompson submachine gun. I also took a German MG-42 off a dead Kraut.
But Ganier soon discovers the MG-42 is too hot to handle.
I started shooting it, but the gun made a noise that was distinctly German. Every time I started shooting it, the Americans started shooting at me. I threw it the hell away. You learn fast or you get killed. I grabbed an M1 instead.
This is the Garand M1 rifle. It was gas-operated and semi-automatic. The American infantrymen absolutely love this weapon. It'll fire 8 accurate rounds at a good distance. In fact, General Patton called this the greatest battle implement ever devised. The Garand's main vice, though, is that users could suffer from Garand thumb. When soldiers loaded the weapon, they would push the clip down, and sometimes the bolt could fly forward, losing the thumb.
Now armed with a scavenged M1 rifle, Ganier joins others from Easy Company as they quickly reorganize and prepare to take on the German defenders of Fortress Europe. They've landed miles from their drop zone, with most of their gear lost and many of their number still unaccounted for. The raid is not off to a good start. The enemy knows paratroopers are down in the area, and they will be ready for them. Easy Company have parachuted into Nazi-occupied France. But this mission could already be heading for the rocks. Their commanding officer has been shot down. They've landed miles from their target drop zone, and most of their weapons are gone. Up until now, Easy Company has had the advantage of night to hide their movements. But now all is about to change. Winters gathers together as many men as he can find as he moves into the hamlet of Le Grand Chaumont. A total of 12 paratroopers have just 2 light machine guns and small arms to take on heavily armed defenders protecting the howitzers ranged against the troops heading in from Utah Beach. Among them are Sergeant Bill Ganier, who has rid himself of the German MG-42, and Lieutenant Buck Compton. They're joined by 24-year-old First Sergeant Carwood Lipton.
By about 8 a.m. on the morning of D-Day, June 6, 1944, there were 13 of us. The rest of our company was scattered over the Normandy Peninsula, and it would take several days for those who had survived to join us.
With the company's commander shot down during the Normandy approach, Lieutenant Winters takes over as the most senior officer. The amphibious landings at Utah have been underway since 6:30 a.m. Thousands of American troops are waiting ashore and are heading inland and in range of the howitzers Easy Company are now ordered to destroy. Hard intelligence comes through that they are firing directly onto the causeways leading out of Utah Beach. The battery is positioned around 200 yards away from the Grand Chaumont and close to a farmhouse called Brecourt Manor. The guns are mounted at 100-yard intervals, heavily concealed by a stretch of hedgerow nearly half a mile long. Running parallel is an interconnecting trench, allowing men to move quickly between the 105s and keep them supplied with ammo. To the west of the howitzers are 3 MG-42 machine gun posts. These offer protective covering fire for the howitzers, as well as targeting any Allied advances from the south. Only 3 miles inland, the 105mm howitzers are a deadly threat to the D-Day landings. With 32-pound shells blasting from the muzzle at over 1,700 feet per second, these formidable German guns are capable of raining fire down onto Utah's vulnerable and crowded causeways. Winters has almost no information about the scale of the enemy they face. And on their first day of combat, the odds are stacked against his bunch of rookie troops. Each howitzer is heavily defended by German gun crews. And on top of this, MG-42 machine guns are covering their rear. Winters orders Compton and Garnier to check the first one out.
Headquarters didn't know about that German battery. A lot of things they didn't know. We had to take everything as it came at us.
Three of the German MG-42 machine guns are positioned to the west of the 105s. The fourth is at Brecourt Manor. Luckily, for now, they are pointing away from Easy Company, training their sights in the direction of the nearest Allied parachute drop zones. They're fully armed to protect the howitzers. These are weapons Easy Company don't want to mess with.
The MG-42, aka Hitler's buzzsaw. It put down a fearful rate of fire. It was belt-fed and fired a 7.92 round. It's a big beast with a big appetite. It'd gobble this lot up in under 2 seconds. MG-42 was beautifully engineered, but if it had an Achilles heel, it was the instability of the bipod. When you shouldered the weapon and led forward, the barrel could just pile in.
Winters and his men are between a rock and a hard place. It's vital they keep the MG-42's vicious firepower at bay. But they must take out the howitzers at any cost, eliminating the deadly threat to the D-Day invasion on Utah Beach. To maintain the element of surprise, the paratroopers sneak along using the hedgerows as cover. But these hedges can also favor the enemy.
They were thick. 10 feet high, 6 feet wide, the things were everywhere. You couldn't see over them, you couldn't jump over them. Good places for the Germans to dig in and hide, but it ain't easy fighting.
Taking advantage of the hedgerow cover, Winters positions the first of his 2 M1919 machine guns on his left flank to provide suppressing fire. Another machine gun is set up close by, directly opposite the first German 105.
The Browning M1919 is a 30 caliber medium machine gun. Belt-fed, it could fire up to 600 rounds a minute. The barrel was air-cooled and put a serious rate of fire down. It took a 2-man team to operate this. One to belt feed the rounds and carry the legs, the other one to lift this beast, and it was a beast. It was the sort of weapon you gave to the least popular man in your platoon.
The basic plan is being revised as they're going along. They decide to launch a 2-pronged assault to take out the first German howitzer. This will open up the remaining 105s to attack.
We didn't know what we were gonna find, how many Germans we were gonna come face to face with. My heart was pounding. It was scary. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing yet either. Nobody did. we didn't really give a damn.
Easy Company moves into their final attack positions. Sergeant Lipton works his way around the hedgerow to the far right flank. He can't see enough of the Germans, so he has an idea.
When we got around the flank, we couldn't see a thing because of the brush and high weeds. So I climbed a tree. I was looking right into the Kraut positions.
Easy Company is in position to attack. It's do or die. Lieutenant Winters gives the order to open fire.
Despite his weakened numbers, Winters uses classic infantry tactics. First of all, the machine guns fire, softening up the enemy, forcing him to take cover. Then the main assault comes in from the flank, and finally, the reserve element come in to support. And to do it successfully, you need surprise, perfect timing, and the best men you've got, and just a little bit of luck.
Buck Compton and Bill Gunnier charge the first MG position. The Germans react quickly, but Compton has the element of surprise. And a Thompson submachine gun.
This is the M1 Thompson submachine gun, designed in World War I and was basically a trench buster. This is a punchy weapon. A 45 caliber round, it could do some damage. Hasn't necessarily got the range, but in close quarter battles, it's a good weapon to have. It was extremely popular with the guys on the ground. They wanted this weapon. And why not? It looks great and it does the job.
Compton is certainly counting on his Thompson as he moves into the trench.
My intent was to spray them both quickly like Jimmy Cagney in a gangster movie. The Germans heard me. Without hesitation, I pulled the trigger. All I heard was a soft plunk. My machine gun was completely useless.
The D-Day landings are in full flow. Up on the high ground, Easy Company are desperate to stop 4 German howitzers from unleashing their deadly force onto the troops heading inland from the beaches.
The D-Day operation isn't going to plan. There have been failures to put the parachutists down where they needed to be. There have been problems with the weather. So the maximum damage that those who are already ashore could do, the better.
With the US troops on Utah Beach vulnerable to German fire, Easy Company's job has got to be done, and has got to be done fast. But the assault on the first howitzer is in trouble. Face to face with 2 Germans, Compton's gun is jammed.
I've never been sure exactly when Wild Bill joined me. He may have just sprinted across, bold as ever, as soon as I reached the hedgerow.
Gonier's grenade does the job with ruthless efficiency.
The Mark II grenade, known as the Pineapple and mainly used by American troops in World War II. It was heavy, but its shape meant it was easy to handle and enhance fragmentation. It was initiated by pulling the pin, the handle would fly out, and you'd get rid of it.
We tested the damage a Mark II grenade can do in close quarters using wooden witness boards. These shrapnel holes show the devastating impact this weapon can have on troops in a trench. From his vantage point in the tree, Lipton opens fire at the same time as Gunnier is throwing grenades into the German machine gun nest.
I fired several clips of ammo into them. The Krauts pulled back a couple of 100 yards to a tree line, and then they saw me. I thought for sure they had me as they were clipping branches off and bullets were cracking all about me. That's the fastest I ever came out of a tree.
Now in the thick of battle, Easy Company are drawing deep on all their grueling training.
The 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles as they're called, is an elite American paratroop regiment, highly trained and ready to be the leading wave of the American invasion in Normandy. All the soldiers in the 101st were volunteers, and they were put through an exceptionally rigorous training.
Their basic training at Camp Toccoa had been physically punishing and included numerous runs up Currahee Hill, which loomed 800 feet above the camp. This phase of their selection ended with a make-or-break 118-mile march, to be completed in just 75 hours. Easy Company will need all this training. They have not been in battle before and are now taking on the first of the Howitzer 105s. Worse still, the Germans are showing no signs of backing down, and they'll soon realize they're at an advantage. They greatly outnumber Easy Company. Now, speed is everything. Winters leads a group in to attack the first howitzer. His directness is the last thing the Germans expect.
Winters and the other guys were right behind us. And all of us started lobbing grenades and shooting everything we had. It was stupid, but we did it so quick, so fast, they thought an entire company was attacking. We caught them with their pants down.
Easy Company are close to taking the first gun, but Winters is worried. Counterattack is a big problem when your unit is fighting in a ditch system.
My next thought was, Jesus Christ, somebody will cut loose in a minute from further up the trench. I flopped down, and lying prone, I could look through the connecting trench to the next position, and sure enough, there were two of them setting up a machine gun.
Winters stays calm and remembers his training.
I got the first shot in and hit the gunner in the hip. The second caught the other boy in the shoulder.
At last, the first howitzer is secure.
The men got to the first gun in record time, but it was important to consolidate the position and move forward before the enemy had time to regroup. The Germans still didn't know how many men Winters had. At some stage, Winters had to figure out how to put these captured guns out of action for good. If they were overrun, he didn't want the 105s to fall back into enemy hands.
Easy Company has the first 105, but the fortunes of war can turn on a dime. And they do, as the men move on towards the second gun.
Compton let out a yell. Look out! We all hit the ground for cover, but there was no cover.
The German M24, known to the Allies as the potato masher. It was a blast grenade rather than fragmentation, and the wooden handle was ideal for throwing. It was initiated by turning the bottom and pulling hard. All you had to do then was throw it.
When the dust clears, remarkably, nobody has a scratch on them. Across the 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coastline, D-Day is well underway. Omaha Beach has so far suffered the highest number of casualties. And inland from Utah, the Brecourt Manor howitzers are still threatening the American advance. But the 105's trench system, built by the Germans to keep the guns well supplied with ammo, is now working in Easy Company's favor. Winters and his men can quickly advance on the second howitzer and remain sheltered by the trench from any enemy fire.
It was time we took the second gun, I thought. So I left 3 behind and we charged the next position with grenades and lots of yelling and firing.
Sergeant Bill Gunnier is in the first wave.
You get the strength of an ox on the battlefield. Your adrenaline's going, you're hyper alert. You see, hear, and smell everything. Your movements are quick. Your body's in survival mode.
The second gun is captured. But Utah Beach is nowhere near safe. The enemy is still hammering the troops moving inland along the causeways. The 2 remaining gun batteries have to be taken.
Winters and his men have to act quickly to put the remaining guns out of action. The men on Utah Beach are relying on him.
But Easy Company is stretched out and running low on ammo. Winters has Bill Gunnier call headquarters.
We didn't even think about what we had. We were so gung-ho, we threw everything at him. And it was almost too late when we realized it.
This is a dangerous moment. Easy Company have the initiative and seem to have the German defenders running scared. However, they are still massively outgunned. They're under fire, low on ammunition, and suffering casualties.
Winters orders Lipton to hunt for more explosives to destroy the guns. But it leaves him with hardly enough men to hold ground.
It was almost certain that if the Germans knew how many men they had, they would launch an aggressive counterattack. To consolidate his advantage, Winters needs reinforcements, he needs ammunition, and he needs TNT to blow up the guns they've already taken, and he needs them fast.
Winters and his men are up against it, with ammo running low. At this rate, they don't know how much longer they can keep up their attack. The machine gunners, plus 2 men from Able Company, finally reach Winters' position. One of these men is 22-year-old Private John D. Halls.
He had served as a waiter in the officers' mess where I knew him.
Winters orders his light machine gunners to move up and add their firepower to an attack on the 3rd gun.
We charged the 3rd gun, firing at them firing at us. We had to make sure every shot or grenade counted, because if we ran out, we were done.
Halls is in the front wave as the assault begins, and charges past Compton as he attacks the next gun.
I saw him spin around and sprint back toward me. He took a bullet in the back and collapsed in front of me. Dead.
Easy Company have suffered another casualty, and they still have 2 howitzers left to take. They're massively outgunned and outnumbered. They desperately need support if they're going to put a stop to the remaining 2 guns, still threatening the D-Day landings. A small group of elite American paratroopers are assaulting a gun battery, shelling the troops heading up from Utah Beach. Easy Company has taken the first 2 howitzers, but 2 more guns remain. Outnumbered by the enemy, the unit has just lost Trooper Halls to a German bullet. Easy Company is now low on men and ammunition.
With casualties taken, this could be disastrous for morale. But despite the setback, Easy Company continue their assault.
With sheer guts, Winters and his men storm the third gun. Helpless, the Germans are completely overwhelmed in a hail of bullets. They surrender, and the third howitzer belongs to Easy.
Winters now has to put the 3 guns out of action permanently if the raid is to be successful. The fortunes of war can turn very quickly, and the Germans can't be allowed to take those guns back.
Winters orders TNT and grenades to be stuffed down the barrels of the 105s. It's guaranteed to put these guns out of action for good. 3 howitzers are out of action, but the 4th remains. As long as it stays in German hands, it can threaten the advance inland from Utah Beach. Easy Company is still drawing heavy fire from the Germans. But as any hope of taking the 4th gun dwindles, new blood arrives. Lieutenant Ronald Spears and soldiers from Dog Company move in to reinforce Winters and his unit. Despite enemy fire, Spears begins his run to take the 4th and final howitzer.
Spears went right in to take the 4th gun, and I was so hyped, I followed right behind him, covering him from the rear. Spears was as nutty as I was. He sent the Germans fleeing, and he took the gun, but he lost 2 men.
The Germans make a break across a field to the safety of Brecourt Manor. Easy Company has the enemy on the run. Spears' heroics have taken the 4th and final gun. Dick Winters scours the gun emplacements for vital intel. In their retreat from the 2nd howitzer, the German defenders have failed to protect their secrets. Winters makes an extraordinary discovery.
I found one good map showing all 88 positions and machine gun batteries on the peninsula.
This intel is invaluable to the Allies.
The finding of a map on the Brecourt position was extremely important because this intelligence could be used to pinpoint other German positions which would be a threat to Allied forces on D-Day.
We saved the lives of the kids coming in on the beachheads. We saved quite a few. We got a letter from a guy who came in on the beach, and he thanked us for knocking out the guns.
It's a classic demonstration of small unit tactics overcoming a much larger force in a heavily defended position. The bravery and audacity of the outnumbered men was vital, but tactics and planning was equally as important, with little time for reconnaissance of the enemy position.
For Dick Winters, Brecourt is a defining moment.
It was not so much a feeling of happiness as it was satisfaction. Satisfaction that I got the job done and that I had proved myself to my men. Brecourt gave me confidence in my ability to lead. That's why it remains so special to me.
Before this assault, the airborne troops of Easy Company were untested. After it, they would become the feared shock troops of the European theater, acquitting themselves with extraordinary courage again and again from Arnhem to the Ardennes forest.
Easy Company went on to fight across France, through Holland and Belgium, and finally ended their European campaign with the capture of Hitler's Eagle's Nest in the Bavarian Alps. But perhaps nothing can overshadow Easy Company's heroic actions at Brecourt Manor. The battle that has gone down as one of the greatest raids of World War II.